So today we are going to talk about landing shots in Star Wars. By that I mean shots in which the camera focuses on a ship of some kind coming in for a landing. I restricted my discussion here to shots of spaceships, not speeders or other vehicles. We're also only talking about the live-action Disney Plus shows, in part because somebody has already made a video about landing shots in the prequels, and in part because I'm going to wind up talking about one of the things Andor does differently than the other shows. Before we talk about these shots, let's talk about something more basic: establishing shots. If you don't know the term, you definitely know the kind of shot I'm talking about, an image that explains where we are. Sometimes they use landmarks. Shots of the Golden Gate Bridge show that we're in San Francisco, while shots of the Eiffel Tower show that we're in Paris. Establishing shots have been part of the language of cinema for many decades. They explain location to the audience in an efficient way. In Star Wars, all the locations are invented, so showing a landmark won't necessarily help the audience to know where we are. Sometimes it does. The two sons of Tatooine are pretty well known at this point, and a vast multi-dimensional city is probably going to be Coruscant. But for the most part, establishing shots don't work in Star Wars the same way they do in movies based in the real world. So, how does Star Wars tell the audience it's moving from place to place? Often with landing shots, which are generally composed of 3 segments. Here's an OG landing shot from The Empire Strikes Back. First, the Millennium Falcon travels through Cloud City. Along with giving us a good view of the city, which tells us a little about what kind of place this is going to be, this part of the shot is about displaying the designer's imagination and about how well that imagination was rendered by data engineers. Second, the actual landing. Usually the angle on this shot is from the ground, and it usually shows the landing gear popping out of the ship and the ship coming to rest. This part gives good detail about what the ship looks like, what condition it's in, and sometimes who's on the landing pad to greet the ship. Third, the characters coming out of the ship. This shows the scale, as well as information about how to get in and out of the ship that's sometimes relevant later. In the prequels, there are so many landing shots of so many different kinds of ships that I became a bit cynical about it. Such detail can sell toys, a lot of different kinds of toys. And as far as Star Wars goes,
that's the sweetest plum!
In watching these movies, I also invented a bit where I shout, "Landing shot, drink!" every time I see one. Everyone watching Star Wars with me loves this bit, I'm sure of it. Anyway, then came the Disney shows. Once I started watching them, I noticed there were a lot of landing shots until we came to Andor. The show is complex with multiple storylines, so it's possible I was just paying too much attention to do my bit. So that's why I went through all the Disney shows and found all the landing shots for your delectation. I sped them up so we don't spend as much time on them as the shows did, although I also uploaded a regular speed version I posted separately. Obviously, The Mandalorian has the most landing shots, 20. You can explain this partly because Mando travels a lot, going from one planet to another for bounties and quests, but Andor takes place on a lot of different planets too, and it only has 6 landing shots. Why is this? Well, instead of landing shots, Andor uses regular establishing shots more often. The reason it's able to do that is because the different locations in Andor are visually distinct from one another. We know immediately if we're cutting from the prison colony to Mon Mothma's residence, or from the ISB to Ferrix. The characters definitely help to establish where we are, but so do the differing environments. The Mandalorian has differing environments, but where we are is less important than the plot, which is what makes it all the more baffling that the show spends so much time on landing shots. There aren't even that many different ships, but we sure do see them land a lot. Book of Boba Fett doesn't have a lot of landing shots, but that's because it takes place almost entirely on one planet. When it turned into The Mandalorian for a couple of episodes there, the landing shots resumed. There's only a few I want to talk about as different from the rest. These shots from Kenobi, of a vehicle approaching on Alderaan, are not so useful to the plot, but they're prime fan service, because a lot of us have been wanting to see Alderaan for many years. This shot from the Book of Boba Fett clearly shows 2 suns shining on the planet Mando is approaching. Just from that shot, we know it's probably Tatooine, and so it turns out to be. The Mandalorian's shot of the TIE fighter's wings folding to land does have some toy selling possibilities, but it's also just super cool. This shot from Andor of Luthen leaving his ship is the only shot I found of an interior angle on a character leaving their ship. All the rest of them are from the ground. There are a few sequences of Mon Mothma landing in her speeder at Luthen's shop. It's not the same thing because it's not a spaceship, but here's why those scenes don't waste the audience's time. Andor has multiple scenes that take place in and around Mon Mothma's speeder. Partly this is because her driver is probably a spy, partly because the speeder is a useful enclosed space for conversation, and partly because the speeder works to show her isolation from everyone she knows. Those are good reasons to show the ship, but all those shots of the Razor Crest landing, slowly and gently, bad reasons to show the ship. Okay, so why am I so hard on landing shots? Because they take up screen time that's not necessary to advance the story, establish character, or provide necessary information to the audience. It's possible to cut them out altogether and just show characters arriving or meeting, as in this shot from The Mandalorian. We saw the ship in the air, and although we didn't see it land, we can assume that it did because now it's on the ground. Or this shot from Andor, where a partial shot of a landing and the focus on this character shows that he traveled to this transport hub and now he is in a new location. It's like driving and parking in regular movies. Mostly, we know what it looks like when cars park. We don't need to see every step of the process. Just the result, that the characters have arrived at a new location. Parking shots are almost always a waste of time. And so I think are landing shots in Star Wars. They might sell toys, but they waste time, which is hopefully not what I've been doing here. I'm off to film myself parking my car, and I hope to see you again soon.
Another happy landing.